Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Hired Geek Podcast, episode number 87 with Amanda DoAmaral. So this is a really fascinating discussion, a little bit of a longer episode, but all really great stuff, trust me. And so we get into her work as the founder of Fiveable, helping students to be successful with advanced placement AP exams that they have for a variety of subjects students take to get kind of credit for college courses and the related subjects. So she really goes into kind of her really thoughtful approach to kind of get greater access to these exams so that students can gain all of the benefits. It's kind of this very unique system that exists right now. And, she's working really hard to provide resources for students to be successful, to really empower students to be competent in their academic abilities to take these tests and be successful. So really interesting stuff. We get into kind of a broader context as well of just kind of education, what's happening right now and how it's changing and evolving and what we're hoping to see kind of moving forward from here. So really appreciate you checking out this episode. Appreciate Amanda for hanging out. But without further ado, this is episode number 87 with Amanda DoAmaral. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. So thank you so much, Amanda, for jumping on to hang out for the podcast here. This is just kind of good serendipitous connection. I know you are doing some really interesting work. This is especially timely as of the recording of this episode, but before we get to any of that, if you just want to really quick give an introduction of yourself and a little bit about your professional background and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me on to talk about what we're doing. So my name is Amanda DoAmaral. I am the founder of Fiveable. And what we do at Fiveable is we're essentially building a social learning network. And so we've really focused on AP students and teachers in the last few years, where we build communities, give students a chance to work together and create content. So we have things like live streams, trivia games, study guides, and ultimately it's kind of culminated in a massive gamified review game where kids are earning points for studying right now. And that's been kind of fun. So before Fiveable, I was a teacher. I taught 9th and 10th grade history in Oakland, mostly AP classes. And before that, I was in college in Boston. And so I spent really the last it's been more than 10 years in education in some capacity, which is kind of crazy to think about. But it's I think I've learned more as a teacher about education than I did as a student. And it just really illuminates so many things about what my own experience was actually like that I've kind of grappled with since then.
Yeah. Very different learning about the system and then being in the system, firsthand seeing, how things actually work and some of those friction points and different things. So, so you're bringing, all that kind of K through 12, firsthand teaching experience to what you're doing now. So I guess just maybe kind of provide that connective tissue of when you made the transition and why this work was so compelling and important for you to kind of make that leap.
Yeah. So what happened was I was teaching in Oakland I taught there for 5 years, and I'm really focused on building up the AP program because it was something that clearly was not built up for me. I was not in APs. I didn't see myself as a part of it. And then as a teacher, all my student loans were kicking in, and I was just realizing what was I doing? All I had to do was take a test and then my loans could have been less. And so at my school, it's one of the biggest public high schools in Oakland where I taught, and it's incredibly diverse. But when I would walk into the AP World class, it was 17 kids that did not look like the rest of the school, right? It was mostly the white students, even though the school itself had predominantly brown and black students. And so that was just a really eye-opening moment of well, what can we do? How can we make sure that this is a bigger space for that all students truly feel welcome and are invited and can be successful? And so after, 5 years of really building up the program, we saw so much success in how we grew the number of students taking AP from 17 AP World students to over 100. And then also how we grew how many kids were passing from 2 AP World students to we had 70 kids in my last year. And so it was just a massive jump that we saw just in AP World. And it was because we were doing things that were interactive, and we gave the students a lot of voice and choice in the class. And it was a fun place to be. It was very much like it's us versus the exam, you know? And so I left the school after the 16-17 school year, and just about 6 months out, I really didn't know what I was going to do after, but I kind of just needed a break. And I started getting emails from kids around December, January. Some of my former students just like, Miss D, you got to help us. We're all going to fail. We're freaking out. We haven't written an essay all year. They were dealing with a AP US history teacher that just was not as innovative as I was, I guess. And they were really feeling it. And so that initial request is really what sparked Fiveable, because at that point I just started live streaming. You know, I just was like, they need my help right now. I don't have time to record stuff, so I'm just going to live stream for them and see what we can talk about and how I can support them in a stream. And so I just started streaming on like Fridays and Saturday nights, and kids started coming. And then word got out. I pushed it on Reddit and Facebook groups, and built up communities of teachers and students. And pretty quickly, it was not just about history anymore. It was, we need help in all of these other subjects. And so now we've really built up a really big creator team that produces a lot of different pieces of content, and have really focused on just the big questions around how do we bring students together in a way that empowers them to support each other and unlocks like completely new opportunities for them that go beyond their school, right? It's not just about your four walls, like the zip code that you live in. Instead, like, you can connect with a teacher anywhere, you can connect with students anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really awesome. Yeah, just seeing what you're working on, because like, yeah, on one hand, it could be, you're connecting with a student, anywhere in the country to kind of normalize, like, yeah, we're both feeling really anxious about this test or maybe struggling with similar things, but then also, getting help from sort of a near peer who, maybe recently took the test and passed it, or, really, like great teachers who are willing to give their time and are, committing to help out with these sort of things. Because I think, yeah, it's always been really interesting with the whole kind of, advanced placement infrastructure, as much as I've understood it. I personally did take the AP US history exam way back when, and, I did well, and, all of
Nice.
that. But, in hindsight, like, yeah, with the kind of things like you're talking about, it's, it really takes committed people, working in schools to really encourage and kind of nudge, tap students on the shoulder to say, like, you should take this. This is how it all works and all that. Like, it does feel sometimes like it's very mystified or kept behind curtains, and those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the very least, like helping, on your end, like helping students just to be able to be as successful as possible. Certainly, that still relies a little bit on how well maybe you can kind of like, market and kind of get the word out, or just, committed folks in schools across the country to be trying to build those spaces to, have the students take a course throughout, their time in high school and stuff like that. Cause I know it's like, it's an interesting thing too. It's like, you don't have to like take any kind of course. You could kind of just like study on your own. And I think that's fine. You could
Mm-hmm.
take an actual like course in high school, which is what I did throughout my entire senior year, which was also really great. And yeah, I mean, it's just like when students get that kind of opportunity, yeah, it's like you could stack up a bunch of credits and go into any college and be so much ahead of the game, and, help really with cost and finishing sooner and those sort of things. Like, the impacts can, and then like the results can be really, really positive.
Yeah. It's huge, right? Like, it's one test that will cost you $95, which is a lot for a high school kid, and College Board is making a killing on these. But that one test converts to thousands of dollars of credit each. And so I wish that high school me understood the like financial power that could have. And then also, I think there's a lot to be said too of just seeing yourself in an academically rigorous space. I think like for a lot of students going through, middle school, high school, you see AP, and just like you said, it does sometimes feel like this space that you don't know anything about. It's like this mystery, right? Like,
My brain
That's
just thought
where,
of it as like a speakeasy or something. Like it's some
yeah.
sort of speakeasy. You have to figure out the password. And then it's like, oh my gosh, there's tests for all these things that I can get credit, but like if you don't know the password, then you're just sort of aloof and,
Yeah.
you're worse off.
That's exactly what it feels like. It's like and when I was in high school, I saw it as like that's the space for the smart kids, and I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
know how they
Mm-hmm.
got there or how I could get there, but or even if I wanted to be there, and it was just like kind of confusing. And then even into college, right? Like it affects you because then if you don't see yourself in those spaces in high school, then what does college feel like? What are you thinking about for college? Are you thinking that you can go, that you can be successful, that you belong in those spaces? And so taking an AP class, the way that I see it, it's like getting the college credit is awesome, and that's something I want to support students in doing. But just taking the class and taking the test and knowing that you can do this, right? You don't need a password to be in here. You can get in here, you can do it, you can feel successful, you can be successful. All of those, that kind of confidence building really can change the trajectory of a student, where they may not have opted into rigorous classes before. They may not have seen themselves as going to college or being successful in college before. And then all of a sudden you experience some success that you thought was impossible and you're like, actually I could do this, And that is what is so powerful about it, that I see. And I think that is also why so many students want to help each other, because it is like it does feel like this mystery, but then once you see it, once you get it, then it's like you want to show everybody else too, because you're like, this is, wait guys, we can do this, this is possible. And so I think that's really what I saw so much in my own students, and what they were asking of from me. It wasn't about me telling them some world history facts that they couldn't Google. It was the confidence building. It was like demystifying the rubrics of the test in a way that
Mm-hmm.
made it approachable. And as soon as I started doing that for world history, they were very, very quick to say, like, can you do this for chemistry, for calculus, And
Right.
for me personally, those subjects still sound like mysteries. But yeah, right? Like, there's teachers that can do that for you. And those are when you think of the best teacher that you've ever had, that's who we can kind of bring on our platform and lift up. And every student should have access to that teacher in any subject. And so that's kind of at the heart of it. It's like, what does it look like if all students truly had the same academic opportunities? I think the world would just be a much different place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that core kind of mission and values of Fiveable and what you're doing. And yeah, I mean, that's a really good point too, of what you're saying of just like the kind of academic confidence. I think it's just a really important kind of subtext to kind of this whole experience of preparing, taking a test and all that. And, yeah, it just sounds to me too, like it can be supplemental to a student who is taking, like a course focused on an AP subject. It can be kind of supplemental and complementary to that. Or for so many students who may not have that, room in their schedule, or there's not even any sort of option at their school, then, they figure out the password, they kind of get into the room, then they're like, great, awesome. I can get this really high quality, support and those sort of things. That's really great that,
Mm-hmm.
um, you have that, like that space for those who might not have it, or for those who just maybe need a little bit extra. If they already do even have space, they might just want something a little bit more like one-on-one or something.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like just to like connect it to even just like adults, I hear people say things all the time as adults of like, oh, I'm just not good at geography, or I'm just not good at math, you know?
Mhm.
And like those phrases drive me insane because it's just like you can of course have things that you don't like, that you're not interested in, but the reason why why you say that, why you think that you're not good at that, is because you've had experiences before that have told you that, right? Like either someone told you that, or your grades told you that, or you felt like you just couldn't. And so you've built up these walls, right? And I think we see that a lot with students, especially students of color in like STEM, for example, right? Where or for girls in STEM, like where you're just told like this is not something that you're good at, or that you will be good at. And so for kids, I think the most important thing as for a teenager is just to experience the like rigor and experience the success in it. And that is what changes your mindset. Like I talk to students a lot about this. Like they're freaking out right now. Like we're obviously talking before the exams, but even after the exams, this conversation happens too, where it's like just taking the test, just putting yourself out there and studying and taking the test, you are now better off than a whole percentage of students. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you get a 1, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Like obviously I want you to get a 5. I want you to get college credit. You want that too, but in the end, it's okay. Like none of us are, as adults, we know that the AP scores aren't gonna, the score itself isn't gonna change you all that much. It's nice, it's awesome to have that college credit, but just the fact that you took the test, that you knew that you could, you know, that's where things are gonna change for them. And so it's just, I just try to like calm them down. They put a lot of pressure on one test score, and it's just, so what? You get what you
Yeah.
get, and I think after that, it's a matter of what you then do with it.
Yeah. Well, because it's like you kind of like nothing's taken away. Like obviously there's like a dollar cost to like just like get in to
Right.
take the exam, but like if I don't do it, then I don't even have the chance to get anything. So it's like you're putting
Right.
yourself out there. You have that sort of opportunity, and I mean because the other thing I'm thinking of now too is like it is like my brain loves metaphors. Like it is just like a way station, like a train stop on your journey through. Like if you don't get off, like you miss it. Like you can't be like, oh, I'm in my second year of college. Let me go back and take the AP. Like I guess maybe theoretically you could, but it just wouldn't make as much sense to do it that way. And I think like, so if you kind of miss that kind of window, then,
Right.
you're just sort of, you're kind of backtracking, and then like it's just more complicated. So, that idea of like, hey, you're getting into this right at the right time, and so many other people aren't doing this at all. You at least have the chance to have something really positive come from this, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
get the
And
full
it's just
benefits from it. Yeah.
your experience can't be then whittled down to one score, because like a kid that got a 1 may have grown way more than a student that got a 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like a kid that took the test, that didn't think they could, they took the class, it's their first AP class, and they worked so hard all year, and they improved so much in reading and writing and study habits and just all of it. And now they're going to take another AP exam. But maybe they got a 1 in the first one that they take. And that then, we've built up this whole thing of like, if you don't pass, was it even worth it? But it's like that mindset is outdated, because that kid that got a 1, that kid that put themselves into it and did it, is so much better off having done it than if they didn't. And
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
just a really important piece, that for any kids that are listening to this after having taken the test, you're waiting on your scores, you're freaking out because you're like, is it going to be worth it? It's all worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Learn as much as you can, and like try to get the credit when you can.
Yeah. Again, like it's as much about the experience as it is literally like the kind of transaction of taking the test and getting scores to then, get credit. So,
Totally.
um, yeah, I mean, we've laid a lot of groundwork of just sort of like this is kind of like the foundation of advanced placement tests and sort of your work and how you kind of came to it. And obviously, as the time of this recording, we are, right in the middle of a pandemic that's been disrupting so many aspects of people's lives. So, what are you seeing right now? You're obviously really plugged into, the facilitation of this advanced placement, all of these advanced placement tests, and sort of high school students as they're trying to, cope with all these changes. So, what are you seeing as the current impacts of the pandemic on, high school students as they're preparing for the exams, but also just like preparing to figure out what's next for them, whether that's college or perhaps
Hmm.
something else because of everything that's going on. So, I guess any thoughts on that of what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a fascinating time, and for so many, and horrifying and terrifying and anxiety ridden time, and the students are feeling all of that too. I think for a lot of kids, studying for exams this year has been just very, very, very stressful, because of course school is closed and they don't have the class environment. Their teachers are of course supporting them remotely. Most of them are. Some teachers are having a harder time with that, and so some kids are feeling really, really isolated. But they also are just missing the class review time. They talk about like the inside jokes that happen in class. You know,
Mhm.
there's something about being in a classroom in review period that is it's like it, it just feels very it feels so intense and very like passionate. Like it's an exciting time in a classroom when all the kids are reviewing for the test, and I think the students know what they're missing right now, and are looking for ways to connect with other kids. And then on the College Board side, of course, they've made the tests online, and there's a lot of opinions about that decision. I think the the hardest thing is that kids and teachers are just really stressed out about the exams because of they're online, but also they look different. The content that's on the test is a little bit different. The way that the
Mhm.
structure of the exam that's different. What is it going to actually feel like while I'm trying to do this? Is my internet going to go out? I don't have a computer. Like there's all these other layers that are just like swirling around students. And meanwhile, we're in a pandemic, so for a lot of kids, their parents are losing their jobs or their families have been affected by the actual disease. And to have to then compartmentalize all of that and then study for a test, I think it's a really high bar. And so I think a lot of kids are really feeling the heat on that.
Yeah,
And
for
then
sure.
meanwhile, they're also thinking about next year, and they're students are the most hopeful people I've ever met because they want to be back in school, and they're hopeful that next year we'll go back to, as they say, normal. But I think in my perspective, I'm not sure what normal will look like next year. I don't think anybody does. And so I think that unknown is also a whole other like stress monster that's kind of awaiting them and their teachers. Kids that are graduating this year are having to make the decision around whether or not to even go to college next year. I think for some students, getting into whatever university was, it felt like the end goal, but going to that university on Zoom is not what they wanted. And so I think they're thinking through, what will college look like next year? Should I defer? Can I even go to school? Do I have the capacity to? Does my family need me to work? I think there's just like a lot of different experiences happening.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, like it is like, and all of those things at once, like your mind is just
Yeah.
maybe going to bounce around and, you know, yeah. And I think it can be hard for a lot of people because certainly, teachers and all these people are going to be those helpers that are trying to, do what they can to support their students. So, because yeah, I mean, it's there's no any one silver bullet here, like any one right way in terms of how can any of us sort of cope with all these things going on. Because it could be for that student, yeah, who is graduating, they might have gotten accepted somewhere, but they might decide to, start in the spring or defer it all together, take a gap year, do something different, or,
Hmm.
go somewhere different than where they thought they might have before. And yeah, anything could be a good choice, like as long as it's done, really thoughtfully and those sort of things. So I guess like in terms of for that individual student or for all the people around that student supporting them, what are your thoughts and ways that, what can and should be done to help try to mitigate those negative impacts of all those kind of disruptions and just sort of, unknowns, which again, certainly some of them, there isn't anything that can be done about those problems to have any sort of immediate resolution, but maybe just the ways that, folks are taking care of themselves or, any of those sort of things. So I guess just, yeah, any thoughts from sort of your vantage point on, advice that you might give in terms of, whoever comes to mind, the student themselves and, or, you know, staff, teachers, like trying to help kind of, mitigate these negative impacts.
Yeah. So I think that one of the most important things right now is like, we keep saying the whole, that we're all in this together and that we're not alone, but like it's real. everyone is dealing with the exact same thing. And I don't know that we've ever experienced something like this, especially globally for this long, that we're literally all facing. And so I think what that comes with is that the problems and challenges that are in front of you now are also in front of other people. And that means that there's a opportunity then to find other people and work together to solve those problems. And so
Mhm.
I think that is it's the silver lining, right, of all of this. That people will do that. They are already doing that. Teachers are finding each other. They're coming together. And they're doing that within their schools, and they're doing that across schools. And they've always done that, but now they're doing it even more, because what remote learning looks like for one teacher can look the same for another teacher, and they can work together to figure out what the best strategies are going to be. As soon as schools closed down, a lot of administrators did that. They collaborated across schools to figure out, what do we do? What is the next few weeks going to look like? What is the school year going to look like? And I would imagine a lot of that work is going to continue over the summer collaboratively. And then from the student perspective, it's the same thing. I think that students, as they're experiencing, whether it's back into another year of high school next year, or going into their first year of college, or going back to another year of college, like, you're not the only one that's experiencing the same questions and new challenges that you are. And I think what's going to be important is that you connect with other students, to figure out what to do. I think, like, as part of that too, I think everyone also is sort of dealing with just like, and to some extent, I think this is a good thing, is like, things don't have to look like they did before, right? The same exact model doesn't have to be true right now. We need to find solutions that will work for this moment. And and they might just look different than we thought. And so when you think about just education as a whole, it's not like it was, working for everybody before. Like, there was plenty of issues across the board. And now we're just being, like, kind of forced to collaborate and problem solve. And so I'm hopeful that out of this comes just incredible innovations, from
Mhm.
any of those stakeholders, because I think there's just this, like, this extra burden and incentive to just, like, figure it out, where in the past we've always had these conversations and these hopes and dreams, but we've never been just truly forced to come together in a way and problem solve in a way that we are right now. And so I think I'm hopeful that this summer we're going to see collaboration in the ed space across every school and every grade level like we've never seen before. And that's going to then lead to some of the most innovative units and lesson plans and school structures and class systems next fall, next spring, that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess that's my long-winded advice, but just like, I think you got to work together with other people. Like, don't try to solve these problems on your own, because you don't need to, and you're better off working with other people to do it.
Absolutely. And I think too, just like having a little bit of like patience and grace with each other, because it's just like,
Yeah.
especially for, professionals out there, like they're balancing so much more than what they expected in terms of like, childcare and work and everything else. And then, yeah, just for
Oh,
like students, yeah, like in terms of like their families and so, they might be just in a very different space in terms of being able to like get their work done in a timely fashion, those sort of things. Like if they're communicating and being proactive and those sort of things, like, I would just hope on all sides, everyone's just a little bit more, um, patient with each other. But,
yeah. And
um,
also, just special shout out to every teacher with kids, because I have no idea how you're doing juggling all of it. Like, I'm just so busy, and I don't have children, and I'm so, I don't know. I respect the hell out of all the teachers out there, like, working so hard and having kids at home too.
Yeah. Because I think, yeah, like everybody's already working at like sort of a lower bandwidth because like, we're not able to maybe like have our little like, escapes and treats and, you can't go like get a massage. You can't like these things that it could be like kind of
Mm-hmm.
pressure release valves for people. It's like, don't really have a lot of those things. And there's all these other kind of stressful things going on. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's just,
I was thinking about that last night because we're in such a whirlwind right now of it's exam season, and then I was like, I wonder, I need to like plan some kind of reward for myself, once this is all done. Like last year, my team and I went and took a trip to the beach for the weekend. That was sort of our like reward. Then I was like, I can't do the same thing this year, but what can I do personally or what can I do as a team? And it's hard to think about like what to do in a pandemic to reward yourself.
yeah. Well, it's like when the power goes out in your house and you keep trying to think of things to do. You're like, well, maybe I'll just like go pop some popcorn. Nope, can't do that. Maybe I'll just go watch a movie. Nope, can't do that either.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, I love that you mentioned kind of that sort of like networked kind of approach to kind of all working together. Because I think it's something I've just been geeking out about it a lot lately because like, folks will go to conferences or jump on like webinars and things, which, certainly we're now kind of awash in webinars too right now. But like, there's always kind of this show and tell that happens, for
Hmm.
professional development with people sharing knowledge, and from one logical point of view, it's like, well, no, why are you helping somebody who works at a different school? And like, certainly like in higher ed, it's sometimes like, well, they're like a competitor. Like, why would you be like, potentially
Hmm.
helping somebody else? But again, people at conferences will do that kind of thing. Like they're showing how they did work and those sort of things. So the idea that a networked approach to all education, because again, these are, people who are committed to helping work and I have to believe, and they should, I think, have the value of like positively impacting as many people as possible through education, whether that's, putting themselves in a position that has a wider influence or, collaborating with a fellow teacher to kind of
Hmm.
get rid of some roadblocks that are getting in their way about how to, utilize maybe a new kind of digital tool or something. So
Hmm.
really love it. I love that you mentioned that because I'm definitely an advocate for that as well. I think that's such a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think like just even in the last several years, I think some of the most powerful like professional learning networks and communities that I've seen are teachers that have been collaborating on Twitter or in Facebook groups or wherever else they're forming communities. And students are doing the exact same thing, right? They're collaborating and sharing stories, tips, tricks. They're even like writing all types of different, study guides or whatever. Here's my notes. They are stepping up too. Like the teachers know that if one of them has figured something out, then all of them have figured something out. You know, and like it's that they go to these different platforms to share what they know. And then the students do the same thing. If I have this study guide, I want everyone to have this study guide. And so that's what I think is so powerful that's happening right now, that it's just amplifying what's happened before. And that's with on Fiveable, like that's the force that we're trying to kind of harness. Like that kind of collaboration is happening, and I want to make sure that that can happen even more deeply. And even to hit more students, more teachers. Like what does it look like if we're moving forward actually together, you know? And just like
Mhm.
in a collaborative way, like there's just so much more innovation that can happen because of that.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I think it's just you know, uh, such a positive thing that, yeah, like you are in earnest trying to make that more of the norm, like just this idea and concept of, yeah, those kind of professional learning networks, kind of peer-to-peer learning. And certainly I think that can be just in terms of advice to try to mitigate kind of these negative impacts is, say, you're a teacher, you're any sort of like support staff in a school somewhere, checking in with students and seeing like, are they utilizing these resources? Are they utilizing their peers? Because yeah, it's such a great, accessible, sort of opportunity for them to be able to get some really positive outcomes for, because I feel like sometimes there's just like those moments where, especially again, you're preparing for an exam and you're just like, I always feel like forget this thing or I can't figure it out. And just anybody who can kind of airdrop in and help kind of
Hmm.
unlock. And it's like, oh my God, okay, yeah. I mean, like, is everything, especially if it's like, it's math or science, like stuff is kind of building upon itself. And if it's like, I cannot figure out this one concept and now you're sort of unlocked and free to then kind of move on. But so, on that point, any other kind of, because I think it's just sort of the optimist in me, or, I think folks trying to look at perhaps some of these innovations that are coming about in this, kind of unprecedented time. Like, are you seeing anything that's kind of reassuring to you? Because it builds on the idea of collaboration, and perhaps anything else that's kind of a silver lining for you in terms of, like you said, I mean, it's perhaps kind of a mixed bag in terms of how people are responding to having the exam be kind of facilitated online. But, for me, like, I'm hopeful that this is really going to force people to be thinking through, like, how do we make sure that we're providing really good, kind of high quality learning experiences online, and have really robust kind of digital engagement infrastructures, after all this is over. So I don't know, anything that you're seeing that you'd want to kind of give a tip of the hat to that's sort of been reassuring as like a silver lining right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, so I used to work in the like tech, like I worked in tech in our district. So like at my school, I was one of the like tech leads, and so I would help. We were transitioning to having, even just at that point, we were giving Chromebooks to teachers and changing out some of the email structures, and I was tasked with leading my school in that transition. And that was, several years ago, and it was a kind of horrifying experience just to see
Uh-huh.
how difficult it was for teachers to use very, very basic tech. And there was pushback, there was, it was just really hard. It was like dragging people along, and like people that were just refusing to even use a online grading system, and so their students wouldn't even know what grades they had until they were submitted. And so that was my experience a few years ago. Now it feels like overnight we've entered a new era. Like I think this is like a lightning strike. Like I think this is going to lead to changes in education like we haven't seen since the 60s. Like education as a whole hasn't really had a massive overhaul like since the 60s. And
Uh-huh.
so, but now every teacher has to bring technology into the classroom. And that should have been true before. It's because it's not just about I need to I should use these tools because it makes learning, this piece of history better. It's also like your students need to know, they need to be tech literate. Like they need to know how to use Google Docs and Google Slides and Google Sheets and all these different like tools that when they enter into college, when they go to the workforce, those are the skills that are going to be important. Like I remember learning how to type in middle school, and
Uh-huh.
I'm glad I did because now I know how to type. And I don't even know if kids are still learning how to type, but they're definitely not learning some of these like higher level, you know learn how to make a podcast, learn how to cut audio and video, and how to build a website. Like there's so many like skills that you don't have to be studying computer science to have to learn these. Every student should be learning these types of skills. These are basic like tech literacy. And so I think what's happening is that as every teacher is now forced to learn them, it's going to trickle down to students, because I think teachers teach what they know, right? Like if you grow up learning, a Eurocentric version of world history, you're going to teach that because that's what you know. And so it takes something that pushes you out of your comfort zone. You then, as a teacher, learn more about a region that you didn't know before, and then you start teaching in your class. The same thing is happening with tech right now, where teachers are figuring it out. They're bringing Zoom into the classroom. They're using Google Classroom. They're creating like very cool like ways for kids to collaborate or create all kinds of different things using Google products or other resources that they have. A lot of teachers are now, even more teachers are creating YouTube channels than ever before.
Uh-huh.
um, and so like all of that I think is very good. Like we're having high school, like getting through high school and not learning some of those basic tech skills is just like crazy to me. And so I think what we're going to see is that as more and more teachers get comfortable with this, more and more students are going to get to learn how to do these different things as well. And that's going to be hugely beneficial for just the future of what is it what are the skills that matter the most that you need to learn? I think these types of tech skills are going to start to get embedded into, I hope, different learning standards. Like we should
Yeah.
make sure that they
Yeah.
know them, and that even like younger kids, how like a younger kid in elementary school could make Google Slides, and they should learn that at an early age and then keep building on that over time. So once they do get a job, it's second nature.
Absolutely. Because yeah, I mean, yeah, it's helpful throughout their coursework, and then helpful, yeah, when they go into the working world. And um, yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's just stuff that would be helpful. Yeah, helpful for anybody to have. And I think that this kind of segues to my next question as well, just in terms of like stuff you're saying, maybe from any kind of like teachers, administrators, is yeah, they're kind of being pushed into this world of all these digital tools and platforms and needing to kind of get things done in a hurry. But I feel like some of it is just like, yeah, like the habit of keeping your learning management system updated with grades for each assignment as they come in, so that a student has a good temperature check of where they're at, and they
Hmm.
can be more informed to work with the teacher on that. And
Yeah.
then yeah, just having like updated resources on there so a student can kind of get things on demand and that kind of stuff. So I think like part of I'm not sure like just how much you're familiar, you do have any sort of insights, but just like, yeah, like I'm sure teachers are having to work on those habits of, engaging more in those spaces and then learning all these platforms. Cause I think, yeah, it's this sort of rude awakening for the systems that did not properly prepare their sort of digital infrastructure of like, yeah, their learning management system, video conferencing, and like, any sort of like community building sort of tools, and yeah, like how they've embedded anything in terms of all those different things that you mentioned. So
Hmm.
not sure if you do have anything, but anything, I guess, in terms of like how you're seeing kind of like teachers and administrators coping with all of this from their sort of side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last few weeks have definitely just been just trying to like stay above water. I think like when it all first happened and schools are like initially closed, I think some schools did a really good job of like taking they had like spring break at the same time, and then they kind of tacked on a week or two so that there was a couple weeks that students were not technically like in classes, and that gave schools and teachers time to plan. And so the schools that did that have have figured some things out. They figured out structures where you have to kind of embed like synchronous time where you can be on a Zoom call together, but also a lot of asynchronous tools too. You don't need to be on Zoom calls every single day to be learning. And so I think a lot of teachers and schools have figured out structures that are working. A lot of them also just like this all happened really fast and they haven't yet figured that out. And they've been very much kind of trying to keep up or struggling to figure out what's going to work. And in that way, a lot of it has gone back to the teacher. And then in AP teachers are just incentivized by the exam as well. And so I think a lot of AP teachers really like kicked it into high gear in the last few weeks, just trying to figure out all the ways that they could get their students reviewing and learning and making sure that they covered all the material, because they couldn't just be done with the year. And
Mhm.
so I'm looking forward to what the work that's going to happen over the summer, because I think next fall what we'll see is just a lot of just like different structures, like even even just having your class on Google Classroom, like you said, like just embedding some of those things in there makes learning more effective. We've been talking about like flipped classrooms for years, where your students watch videos at home of you or of other teachers, and then when they're in the classroom, it's more about the practice, right, rather than lecturing in class and practicing at home, right? Just like flipping the whole idea of homework. And I think that is going to take a lot more hold, right? Because we're not going to come together in a Zoom call and watch a YouTube video together.
Mhm.
Instead, you're going to watch the video, and then we're going to come together and practice something with it. Have a discussion, or do a practice essay together, something around those lenses. And so I think that's like a kind of a fascinating thing, where like that, like flipped classrooms, flipped learning has been around for at least a decade, I would imagine, though, like the idea of it. And now I think a lot more people are going to adopt that because it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, and I'm just not as familiar with like K through 12 or as much maybe with, undergrad, but the space that I work in and online predominantly graduate education, flipped is kind of the norm now. And I think maybe it's just like continuing to kind of trickle down and certainly, necessitated more in terms of if it, I think is like you're saying, kind of the better way, or the do everything at this current time and moment. And maybe people are now seeing like, hey, wow, this is like pretty cool. This is a good way to spend our time. And there's absolutely no shortage of like great educational videos and resources out there now that you can use for the asynchronous work, and then have those discussions or practice in person, like you said. So I'm hopeful that folks can kind of I get, because it's like my worry, and I've seen this mentioned by some people, is like that certain changes will be made and certain things that they're doing now just aren't sustainable, so they fall off, or they'll be like, okay, well, I'll do this for now until everything gets back to normal. But hopefully people
It sticks.
everybody just like it sticks. Like they kind of stick with the habit. So
And I think that it's sort of like it just kind of goes back to like, we don't know how long this is going to be, and so I think if some miracle happens, we have a vaccine and things that can actually be fixed in the fall, then I don't know how long some of these changes will take hold. But my perspective is that a lot of next school year is going to be disrupted, and what that looks like, we don't know, and every school is going to adapt in their own way. But because I really think it's going to be at least another 6 months to a year of having to adapt to this new normal. And because it's going to be that long, like, it's already feeling like, what did we do before? Like, it's only been a couple weeks, and it's just like, so yeah, I don't know. I think that things will stick. I think that people will start to shift, because I think some of the new ways and strategies that they'll adapt are better because they create more touch points, more like spaces for creativity, more ability to like keep track of your students and pinpoint, data. So like all of those are all things that tech can bring. And if you're using that, for those reasons, then it does make your teaching stronger. Like, there's nothing that's ever going to replace a teacher in a classroom. And we will get back to that. Like, Zoom is not going to replace that forever. But there are also a lot of strategies I think could continue even when we are back.
Yeah. Well, and the metaphor I always use, like my kind of geeky, nerdy brain, is like, sort of like cybernetic, like, augmentation kind of thing. It's just like, because like the teacher is the crucial ingredient here, but like, what can we augment that person with to be able to, like in an LMS, track, did they log in? How long were they in there? And what did they do? Like, so because sometimes obviously like somebody's not going to be babysitting that, but if you're like, student X has been kind of falling behind in terms of submitting assignments, let me see like what have they been doing in the LMS for that asynchronous stuff that we've set up in our flipped classroom and that kind of stuff, like and just kind of having that to better inform discussions with the student, or perhaps their parent or something like that. But
exactly. So like teachers spend so much time doing things that like tech could help them do. Like teachers don't, like, we think, even if you just think about like automations, automation is something like, if you think about some of the platforms that help with that, a lot of businesses use automations, but I don't see a lot of teachers automating a lot of things that are just like tasks that could just be easily automated, like emailing updates, like, hey, your kid has missed this assignment, so I'm going to automate this email to be sent out 2 days after. Like things like that. Like teachers spend a lot of time doing tasks that are very repetitive, that if they embrace technology more, it can give them more time to then really be doing what they are good at and what they love, which is working with students,
Yeah, and like how you're saying, like when you're working with all of your AP students originally, like, because I'd imagine, one, like the kind of fork in the road, because you're like, all these students are coming to you and saying like, hey, I need help with this to prepare for the exam. You could have been like setting up individual calls with 25 people, or you could be like, hey, I'm going to be hosting this like live stream this date and time. Jump in if you can, but it's going to be recorded and on demand for you later. And that's sort of like, is so much more efficient than like, you set up 25 individual things, or you're like kind of manually computing gradebook things and you're trying to figure out like who missed what. And then like individually write 25 separate emails to people about the 25 different assignments that they were like late on or do whatever, like, but if there's nudges happening automatically based on like parameters that you set of like, if something's 2 days late, and this many points and whatever, you send this template email and, to these people, like it's just like, it's so much more efficient and helpful because it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Thank you so much. Automated message.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. And then the teacher can spend their time, building creative lessons and like talking to teachers and or to other teachers or talking to students. So I'm hopeful that is what stays, like those are the changes that continue afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I guess really quick as we wrap up, like, you have this different vantage point than I think my kind of typical guest or, kind of audience. So working with high school students and everything, anything that you think that folks who are working in higher ed should know about, all these kind of things that we're talking about here, anything that you kind of want to like just crystallize, really kind of solidify as kind of a final thought here as we wrap up the episode.
I think for folks in the higher ed space, I think what I think students and even me would like to see and to see from the higher ed space in particular is I think kids are really confused and stressed and anxious right now about, how am I going to get into college? What is it going to look like while I'm there? Like for them, they're in high school and so they're taking SATs and they're doing all the things that they were supposed to do to get into college, but SATs look different and APs look different and all these things that they thought they were supposed to do, sometimes they can't. So even like some kids had programs designed for this summer and now they've been canceled and different volunteer opportunities have been canceled. And so a lot of kids are just like, they're freaking out because what they don't know is how colleges are going to react, right? Is it going to be harder to get into school if I didn't do these things? Like that's what's happening for high school students. And so I think what could be really powerful are colleges who create ways to connect with high school students, like get involved in this process, because I think this is an opportunity for colleges to rethink also how they are attracting students. Like why go to college right now? Like that's a really hard question to answer, and like which college to go to, and is it worth it to spend all this money to do this? And I think where a college can show that it is worth it and can help ease students into I want to go to this school and I know I can get into the school is just by creating content that actually like reaches them, like rethinking how you're advertising, how you're reaching the kids and reassuring them, like making sure that for any big school right now that high school students know that the school itself is adapting to this situation too, right? Because I think kids see what's happening in their world and they don't realize that everything is changing, if that makes sense. So like, SATs get canceled and they're like, well, how am I going to get my SAT score? And I'm like, well, the colleges are going to shift too. Plenty have already said like you can get in next year without an SAT score. And so that is confusing for high school students that have been it's been drilled into them for so many years that if you don't do this, you won't get into school. And so I think colleges can be a big part of shifting the narrative a little bit by reaching out to high school students, through social media platforms, doing streams, putting out videos of just like, this is going to be our new admissions requirements. This is what college will look like. This is why you should still want to learn with us, even if we're doing it online. Here's our professors teaching chemistry. Like, see how amazing they are. Like there's ways to like kind of connect them. And so I think I think that's going to be an important piece of this too, is that for there to be connections between high school and college so that higher ed can continue in a way that is also adapted to this moment.
Yeah, I think that's very good. Yeah, just like kind of proactively be engaging with your, admitted and incoming students, in the digital spaces. Because it could be like you're creating content and just having that, available on demand, or I've seen a lot of just like, and my sort of day to day doing, admitted student webinars. So it's like, okay, like you have been accepted, you want to make sure that you feel really comfortable with this and being able to speak with current students or faculty and those sort of things. So absolutely any or all of those kind of things. I think it's time and kind of energy well spent.
For sure.
So as we wrap up, and certainly, you can send stuff over to me that I can include in the show notes. So you don't have to kind of like, precisely cite it right here and now. But anything that you would just want to kind of give a shout out to in terms of resources that we can include for anybody listening to check out. Because I'll definitely, just give sort of an emphasis. I know you're making stuff on Fiveable more open and accessible to kind of anyone and everyone, which I think is awesome. And that's, so much what is kind of happening in the education space right now, which is definitely appreciated. So, if you want to highlight, what you have and anything else that you think would be kind of relevant that we can include in the show notes.
Yeah. So on Fiveable, we've been focused on AP in the past. And I think now, just like everybody else, we're also thinking about how we can support a larger group of students and teachers. And ultimately, what we're building are collaborative communities. And there's a ton of content that we've already have that's all been created by students and teachers. And this summer, we're going to be just building on that more and more and more. And so, thinking about just like a social learning network and how to connect all the other folks that are part of this. And so we're at fiveable.me, and we're going to be running several different programs over the summer to keep students engaged and to be supporting teachers in learning new pieces of tech, but not just through like PD, also just through like actually like building something together. So it's going to be a fun place, over the summer. Now that, of course, not as fun as maybe other camps may have been, but it's something. And so I'm hopeful that people will come through and help us keep building.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely have ways to connect with you and the work that you're doing there at Fiveable down in the show notes. So just thank you so much for your time and all that you shared. Really great stuff and just really great timely conversation. So I'm really glad that we were able to have it. And just thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.